Cast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and thank you for attending our webinar. This webinar is titled Linking Sales Quoting to PLM and CAD for Configure to Order and Engineer to Order products. My name is Steve Schroeder. I'm a Business Development Manager out of California. I've been working for TriStar for the last 3 years, helping companies implement Windchill and automate processes. Prior to that, I did work at PTC for over 20 years. So today what we're really going to talk about is some ways to automate processes using Windchill and using Creo, and really build a configuration process that can be used for both sales engineering and design engineering to build these different types of products. And let me start by talking briefly about a high-level diagram or picture that we often use at TriStar to describe a streamlined product development process. Obviously, we at TriStar, we're partners with PTC. We sell PTC Windchill and Creo, and we help companies implement Windchill all over the world. But what we also want to do, and what we also realize, is to have a complete streamlined product development process. You really need to integrate Windchill with other systems in your environment. Clearly, most companies out there have an ERP system like SAP or Dynamics or others, and the development of the bill of materials, we would argue, should occur in the PLM tool in Windchill, but at some point you'll need to integrate that to ERP. We have been passing bill of materials information between Windchill and ERP using web services, typically through an enterprise change management process, such that when you release a product or you release a bill of materials, through the workflow we can call a series of web services and push that information over to ERP. We've also developed an infrastructure for what we call dashboard reporting, again using web services, so that we can track overall progress of projects, track ECOs, how well you're doing to deadlines, trending of information such that you can determine if your number of ECOs open are increasing or decreasing, and doing those types of things. And that works very well for certain types of products. But as you start creating configure to order and engineer to order products, what we've seen in many companies is they might need something on the front end to have very advanced configuration rules, perhaps a custom user interface to walk a user through how to develop a configuration. There might be various types of output and that people would need at various steps. So for example, a general arrangement drawing or a quote, and perhaps some conceptual models. And obviously as it moves down through the detailed design, it would be nice if this configurator could call into CAD tools like Creo to build custom parts and build drawings and other deliverables that would be needed for manufacturing downstream. So we've actually developed a tool, it's called Controls Pro, that can be used to develop custom configurators, either sales configurators, engineering configurators, or one that really does a combination of both. And this configurator is connected to both Windchill and Creo, and we'll talk about how that works in just a few minutes here. And if you take a look at this problem in a little bit different way, what we've done here is we've graphed kind of the automation complexity, so on different product development classifications, starting with assemble to stock products. So something like a mouse or a high-tech product that just has a SKU that you can go into a store and buy. Typically you're not looking to automate quoting or product development for this. It's kind of upfront, all the design work is done, the SKUs are determined, the pricing is determined, and you move forward with the product release. And clearly, for many years, standard CAD tools and PLM and ERP processes are well suited to this. But as you move over to the right in this horizontal graph to products that are assembled to order, like an automobile, where maybe all the options and choices are kind of predefined so that we know they're all going to fit together, and therefore when a customer selects a series of options, it can move right to the manufacturing floor or the assembly line. Further on down the line in what we call higher automation complexity, you get into configure to order, product engineering to order, and project engineer to order. The way I would define a configure-to-order product is a product that perhaps has so many different options and configurations that you don't want to or can't possibly analyze and ensure that all the different options for the configuration would go together, and therefore a new configuration may need an engineering review cycle or some sort of review cycle to ensure that the configuration is valid. Engineer-to-order products would be products that require custom parts to be manufactured, custom sizes, maybe custom subsystems or some other options that haven't previously been built or defined. And a project engineer-to-order might be a company that designs something that may go into a vehicle, or into a building, for example, where maybe you have multiple configure-to-order products and need to fit into a particular building, and that gets combined into a project. So as you look at this, the requirements and what you need to do and the systems that need to integrate together as you move from a low number of or a low automation complexity to a high automation complexity, what you'll find is that the standard PLM tools and some standard systems out on the marketplace get less well served, if you will, or not targeted as you move to the right on this graph. What we're graphing on the vertical axis here is a number of configurations per year. So if you're only doing one project per year, even if it's highly complex and highly engineer to order, you're probably not going to look at automating your overall processes and quoting just because the volume is not high enough. But if you're doing a high number of configurations per year and you're trying to drive towards more engineer to order, what we've found is that the kind of standard off-the-shelf products that you might have, and there's a variety of them we'll talk about in a minute, are not very well integrated, and many companies struggle to fit into this wedge, if you will. So this is where we're trying to help companies automate processes, integrate sales engineering with design engineering, and integrate the different systems that they would need to take an order in, quote that order, process that order so that they can quickly design and validate it, and then move that on to manufacturing such that they can go out to the shop floor and build that product. So another way to look at this is that many companies have deployed point solutions to do this. So on the sales side, what we've seen is many companies will have a configure price quote system, or a CPQ. And this might be a system that a sales engineer would be using to interface with the customer, define their requirements. There's often custom configuration rules in these tools. And what they will do is pull cost data, perhaps inventory and lead time information, and then provide ultimately a quote to the end customer. The problem with that is that they're very isolated. There are some products out there on the market you can buy, I wouldn't say off the shelf, they're kind of toolkit environments to build up a CPQ system, or many companies we've walked into have developed their own internal system, a custom developed app that many times is highly laborious to maintain and update as new options become available. Some companies even might use Excel and be passing Excel information into other systems to grab quoting information. So this sales configurator front end is widely varied across companies, but the point is that it's typically isolated. It's isolated into the sales engineering organization, and the passing of information downstream to engineering and manufacturing is often very manual. On the other side, you could see engineering configurators. So clearly with Pro-E and Creo today, there are tools like the Notebook, like ProProgram, other options inside of Creo to build up a 3D CAD model that can be quickly configured. The problem with that is that they're often, again, disconnected or isolated from the sales configurator. And if you move further down the line, you might even see configuration tools in ERP systems like SAP to define configurations. And having all these point systems can be very problematic. Clearly, it can be laborious to exchange information. It's hard to track where you are in the overall process. There's duplicate information that occurs. And if you want to update these configurators to allow for new design options or new configurations, Clearly you're updating multiple systems to add those different changes. Again, what we're trying to do at TriStar is integrate all these different systems to have a complete process and automation, be able to develop a front-end configurator that can be tailored to a company with a custom UI that leads a person through that, and then that information could pull right into downstream CAD tools and right down into downstream ERP tools. So how do we do that? Well, what we've developed, as I mentioned earlier, is a tool called Controls Pro, and this is I have a slide with a bit more information on it, but it is a tool really that it's a rapid application development environment. And what the idea of this tool is that we can link into other systems and we can build up custom rules and configuration logic within the tool so that from the user interface then we can call, for one thing, Creo. And this is done through wrapping the Creo VB API. And what I mean by wrapping it is if you've ever gone in and tried to program a new tool on top of Creo's API, it can be very difficult. So what we've done is consolidated some commands like assembling components together or passing a dimension from Controls Pro into Creo and regenerating the model. Made it very easy for an administrator to build up that link and write a simple script, very similar to Pro Program, to develop a new custom model. So we can leverage standard Creo functions like skeleton models and top-down design and any of those tools if you're a Creo user that you're familiar with today. But we have much more power to develop a front-end user interface with more configuration logic, and then we just simply call Creo to build up these custom CAD files. On top of that, our sales and engineering configurator can output documentation, a Microsoft Word file, for example, or PDF with some custom images on it. The end result of this is that you can build up and set up Controls Pro to deliver a quote package. We can also call other CAD packages. So some companies we work with would want to call AutoCAD just to do a simple 2D drawing on the front end to include into a quote package as a general arrangement drawing. So we can call Creo, we can call AutoCAD, we can call even SolidWorks and some other tools from this tool, from Controls Pro, and build up this custom quote package. From there, what we can also do is call Windchill, and we do that through web services. So at TriStar, we actually sell as a product some standard web services that we built in conjunction with a partner of ours called Wincom that use the Windchill API to develop web services calls. So what that means is in the standard scripting function from Controls Pro, we can tell Windchill to go create a new part. We can tell Windchill to build structure based off our configuration logic. We can grab information from Windchill. Have we built this component before? So what that allows us to do is manage the configuration that we're developing from the configurator using standard PLM functions in Windchill. Further, we can link all this CAD data, as you might expect, to this product structure so that we could track which product was quoted, have that quote attached to the NWT part, clearly have the CAD data attached to the Windchill parts as well. So we're leveraging all the core PLM functions as well as being able to automate CAD generation, and the end result is you're going to have a bill of materials and the resulting CAD data being automatically derived from the sales and engineering configurator. From there, you could go through a standard release process through design engineering. Maybe there's some custom subsystems that need to be further designed, and we can release that into ERP, again using web services to build the bill of materials of the new SKU into your ERP system and start demand generation. We've also built links into ERP system to grab cost information and pass that back into the sales and engineering configurator. So hopefully that was fairly high level on the technicality. We're going to go into a live demo in just a minute. But really the key question is, why would you want to link a sales and engineering configurator to the PLM tool? And some very simple questions that often are asked are just simply, who should I send emails to notify for the next step? If I quoted this new product and the quote gets approved and we've been approved to move forward with the project, who gets notified and how do I do it? Am I just simply going to send an email? If so, who am I going to send that email to? Who owns the completion of each process and then the movement to the next step? And how do I track this overall process? So those are some very simple questions. Obviously, there would be more. And the key point is that we can use the core lifecycle and workflow engine in Windchill if we link it into the sales and engineering configurator to deliver those tasks, to automate those processes and track them. So what I'll show you in the demonstration is the ability to launch a workflow from the sales and engineering configurator in a very simple example of a task distribution coming into a person's homepage that was initiated from the sales and engineering configurator. Now, just a quick note on Controls Pro. I'm going to show you a demonstration of just a sample UI. I actually built this UI. I am not a programmer. I'm a mechanical engineer by trade. I'm not a UI designer. But this is an example of what can be done. And we're going to work on a configurable military vehicle. Now, the way this was built was through an editor function inside of Controls Pro. I wasn't planning on showing the editor today in this webinar. If you want to see the editor and some more development, we certainly could contact TriStar. We certainly could give you an overall demonstration of that. But it is a rapid application development environment where you actually have a graphical user interface to develop a graphical user interface. And this is just a sample of one of the toolbars. I can put in an action button. I can put in some input frames. I can put in a table, radio buttons, and I just do that by basically dragging and dropping from the toolbar into the UI development screen. And from there, I can build some custom scripts to say if I hit this button, call Creo and build up a part, or if I hit this button, go query Windchill. And this is very easy to develop, but you can do very advanced and complex configuration rules that can be built into this end product. So let's go take a look at this. So I'm going to start out in Controls Pro as potentially a sales engineer. I'm running this off of a cloud installation of Controls Pro. Controls Pro can be loaded in a cloud environment as a SaaS model, or you can load your own Controls Pro server, as an on-premise installation and setup. And there's a number of different options that you can go into. We have tutorials, documentation. On the server side, if I was logged in, as I am right now as an editor or an administrator, I could go build new, what we call questionnaires or UIs. Right now, I'm just looking at the Sales tab, and what I can see are a number of quotes. Each of these objects right here are a quote or a project. We have a group of contacts over here on the right, and I could grab a contact and assign it to a quote. I can also set some status on a quote. I could say, hey, this sales quote's on hold, or this one's closed. That might send some other actions to some other systems. We can also integrate Controls Pro into CRM tools like Salesforce.com, again using web services as needed. So what I'm going to do is tell Controls Pro that I want to create a new quote or project. And you can see that we have a number of different projects that we can use. These are different UIs and different products that we can start developing. So I'm going to launch this demonstration project. As I mentioned earlier, that is a configurable but fictitious military vehicle. And this is a template that we can build off. We have a concept inside of Controls Pro of a project, a quote, and then a module, if you will. So if I wanted to drive into one piece of a product, I can have a module user interface. Right now we're really at the project level where we could come in and set some high-level information about this particular project. So I could have any number of items in here. I could have, different pull downs for clients, sales region, sales channels. I can give this project a name. I could, put country information in here. It's up to you how you'd want to build up this UI and what information you'd want in it. But the point of this is really to potentially drive costing information and collect perhaps a series of quotes into this project. There was a company we worked with down in Mexico that was quoting actually gas station service station coolers. So inside their inside the store of a gas station, a company might say, hey, I want you to quote a series of coolers for us. These coolers were all custom built, but there was kind of different product lines. So they might set up a project as, hey, this is a new service station we're quoting for Chevron or Shell, and we're going to give them a few different quotes with different configurations of coolers for them, and they can choose the best one that they want. So this again is an example of just putting some high-level project information, and then from there we could develop one or more quotes. So I'll tell Controls Pro that I want to generate a quote, and this quote option then could bring up a UI showing me the different products that I could quote. In this example, we really just have two products here. We have a custom trailer and these custom vehicles, but you can imagine you could have any number of products that you might want to quote that again is going to then fire off our configuration UI. The project information is coming in on the top of this screen. We've automatically got a quote number and who's quoting it, and some other various information. So from here, I'm going to tell Controls Pro that I want to generate a new vehicle configuration. So this is going to be added as one of the line items into our quote. And this is bringing me up a UI to develop the configuration of the vehicle. Now we can have some graphical user interface feedback here on different options that we select, so I can get kind of a quick look of how this might look as I'm running the configuration. We've got a number of different options, and so as I select these different options, you can see we have different options for this tour to this military vehicle and bed options. We can have the graphics update. Now this is again a very simple example of just basically pulling and replacing in some images. We can have some more advanced UI development here to make this look much nicer. We can even call 2D drafting functions as well in this configuration process to actually start drawing out kind of live CAD, if you will, to start developing the configuration right in front of the end user's eyes. What we also have going on here is different warnings that can pop up. So this is just a simple example of a simple warning telling us that we have a long wheelbase vehicle. In this example, we have different bed options, and that might drive different rear frame options. So with this particular bed, again, a pretty simple example, but we know if we have one of the bigger bed options, we're going to need a longer frame. And in this case, we have a four-door vehicle, which is longer, and we have a longer bed option, so we're throwing a warning to the end user. You also might have noticed that if I selected an unarmed vehicle here, some of those input options have dropped away. So we can build up a UI that guides an end user through this configuration process by dropping in new options as they make selections, throwing out warnings as you see here, and even throwing out new buttons and other options that can pop up. We'll come back to this engineer to order bed in just a minute, but the idea of this bed for these vehicles is that you could set custom sizes of this bed and custom number of supports and other things like that that's going to go drive custom CAD files. We'll come back to that in just a minute. We can also have check boxes here for different items that you're adding. Maybe these are the side runners that I'm showing, and that's updating the graphic here, as well as items like the roof lights that are popping on and off. And you'll also notice as I'm developing this, I'm getting some information about cost. So right here on the right-hand side, I can enable this or drop this away if I wanted to, but as I add or remove items into the configuration, it's showing me actually on the right the delta since the last selection, and this is all the cost information that's coming in with the total down here at the bottom for the cost of this particular configuration. So now let's say for this particular item, this configuration is what we want and it looks pretty good to us. We'll hit the next screen here and we'll go into a configuration analysis page. Now what this is showing me is a few different tables and what the selections I've currently chosen. So these are the selections coming in from that first page. This is actually a proposed configuration, bill of materials list, one level if you will. These are all subsystems with the unit price and the quantities and the cost. So there's some items in here that it's selected actually the right size powertrain based on our cab and the bed that we had. It also selected the right rear frame based on some other options. So we can build up inside of Controls Pro configuration logic. Now this configuration logic Often we'll do it through just a simple spreadsheet. So as you select choices, and it can drive which options get added through a matrix done in a spreadsheet. Those spreadsheets could be uploaded into the Controls Pro environment, and that logic can be referenced, or that matrix can be referenced to build up this configuration. You can also use just some standard scripting functions to say, if the root flights were selected, add this line item to my bill of materials. Very simple in the editor environment. So again, we can build up this custom configuration. We are not going from the top down. In other words, we don't have some overbuilt vehicle that we're filtering from. This is really a bottom-up approach, which is different than, clearly different than having an overbuilt assembly where you're trying to define all these options and filter from it. This provides, I think, more flexibility to build from the bottom up. Now, I also have a couple buttons over here on the left-hand side. The first one I have are to compare these choices to Windchill, really. We call it the DB on this button. But what we're trying to say here is many times we've noticed that a company might have a sales engineer or even a design engineer that wants to run through and build up a configuration, and they're not sure if they've built this configuration before or not. Maybe they try and have some very complex part numbering system so that based on all these options that you select, some intelligent part number is used, and then they try and search by that intelligent part number. That's a common approach, but if you've tried that before, you might realize that there's some limitations and often issues with trying to develop these accurate part numbers. And clearly, if I try and add in some new options and I can get into this environment or situation where my part numbers become so long, they become almost unmanageable. What we're doing is we're actually storing these choices into the database, and we can link Windchill part numbers to these selections of choices. So what I can say is, hey, go ahead and compare these choices that I've made to what I've got in my Windchill database. And what you'll see here is that it's going to bring into this table not only the part numbers, but also what percent similar they are. So for example, here I've got some part numbers of the vehicles and the descriptions, and I've got the cost information. This is actually what we quoted on this particular configuration, and I can see how similar they are. And with this view button right here, I can actually pull it up into this table. This is an existing PLM configuration, and I can compare this proposed configuration with what we actually developed for the last configuration, or this particular configuration we built using these choices. And what you'll notice is that, first of all, the price of this one's almost $77,000, where this one was around $63,000. What's the difference here? And I can very quickly see that the difference is actually that there was a custom radar detection system that was added to this particular configuration that costs $13,000, and it's highlighted for me, and I can quickly see what the differences were between really the rule-based configuration and then this particular end-user configuration. Now, what's interesting about this is this configuration is not stored in some Controls Pro database. This is that was a live call into actually TriStar's server that is in Phoenix with our from our Controls Pro cloud-based server, and that was again using web services. So what it did was Controls Pro looked through these choices, said these are the part numbers, and then it actually went into Windchill and retrieved this particular product structure, this configuration. What you'll notice here as well is that all these subsystems are release subsystems. This custom radar detection system, this is really, at this point, it's just a placeholder just for an example, but this one's in design, and this overall configuration is in work. So Controls Pro, again, went into Windchill, retrieved this configuration at the first level, got all the part numbers, and compared that to the proposed configuration, and that was presented back to the end user. So that's a quick example of showing one of the types of calls into Windchill from Controls Pro. Now let's go back to the previous screen, and maybe we want to build up a little bit different configuration. Maybe for this example we'll not use the roof lights. We'll go to this troop carrier, even though it's a long wheelbase, and we'll go to a different turret or something like that. I'll go again to our configuration analysis page. I can tell it to compare it. There's no existing configuration there, So maybe I'm going to go ahead and build this new one. So I'm going to say, hey, this is 4. I'm just going to give it a number. Now we can't have auto part numbering set up. This is just, again, a demonstration environment, so I don't have that set up, but we could have an auto part numbering system set up. I'll give it a name. And what I'll do is then say, okay, we're going to submit this configuration to Windchill. All right, so I have just a couple messages coming back to the user saying what's going on. So we just sent that configuration to Windchill. We stored the selections into Controls Pro, and we're done. Now what's interesting here is, let's go back into Windchill, and I'm going to go into my home page. And if I go into my home page, what you'll see, and I'm in Mountain time zone right now, but you'll see that at April 6 here, 2017, we have a new configuration that's been delivered to me, and it's in the proposal phase. So again, simple example here, but think of the power that you can do. A sales engineer, perhaps just using that Controls Pro front end with a UI that's tailored to them to walk them through a configuration process, just initiated a downstream review process. So here, directly into my inbox or my task pane, I can then get a look at what that configuration is. So we'll go in and take a look at this configuration. We can go right to the structure page, and what you'll see is we never call CAD here. We're not using options modeler. We're not filtering a overbuilt assembly or any of that nature. We actually built up a new configuration model. Now we did this as a special subtype inside of Windchill so that we can set up different workflows and processes built around it. And we built up this brand new configuration for us. All right. Now what you'll also see is that we didn't put in any custom subsystems here. We just use kind of all standard modules, if you will, for the building of this particular configuration. So the subsystems themselves here are actually released. The initial configuration, or the high-level configuration here, the structure, is in a proposal lifecycle state. So what could happen here is that this might go to somebody for approval. If I go back to the home page and maybe it's a configuration manager, but somebody in a particular role to approve the downstream process of this configuration, you could have a simple workflow process set up where you could either approve or reject it. If I reject it, that task might go back into that sales engineer and that configuration via an email, and maybe you need to rework it. If I approve it, we could change the lifecycle state of that configuration, and that might send a notification then to a downstream engineer or somebody else to complete any design work that is required on this configuration. Or if we release that, then we can actually integrate this bill of materials down into ERP using standard configuration functions. All right, so there's another simple example of how an integration from a sales engineering portal to a into Windchill that can then drive processes might work. Now let's look at a little bit more advanced example here. So this was clearly, again, just putting together some existing modules into a new configuration. If I come back, let's say we're finished with this configuration. What you'll see now is I have a new vehicle configuration as a line item into my quote. Let's build a little bit different one here. Let's go in and build another vehicle. Maybe for this particular customer or project, they're asking us to quote multiple vehicles. And in this example, maybe we'll make this unarmed. We'll select off a couple options that we see here. But for the bed, perhaps we're going to do a custom or ETO bed. Now what you'll see here is that there's another warning process here given to the end user that's saying, please initiate this ETO bed process. And it's looking for some high-level parameters of the overall bed. And there's a new button for me to build this ETO process. Now if I initiate this ETO process here, what you'll see is I get another UI developed for me. Let me hang on just one second. Let's pop back into here for a second. What I wanted to show is that you can actually have 3D models. This is a Creo view model being pulled into this UI. So I mentioned earlier on, how you can have kind of just these static images being pulled in and develop it that way. We can actually pull in Creo view information interactively into these questionnaires, as we call them, these configurators, and build up 3D information. So there's a variety and many different possibilities on how you're presenting kind of configuration information back to the end users to drive them through the configuration process. What you'll also see up here is we're having some very simple calculations here. There's a calculation for the bed pricing that you'll see adjust as I change the number of side angle supports and the angle of side angle, or taper angle we call it. And there's also a max load calculation. So this is a pretty simple calculation that's built into our configurator, but you can make very complex configurations. You can even go out and call Creo Simulate to run an FEA process if a user wanted to wait. The idea being, if you can put some engineering rules behind this, you could present those engineering calculations back to perhaps a sales engineer, and they might know, hey, my requirement from this customer is that this ETO bed has to hold whatever it is, 4,000 pounds as a max load or 6,000, and walking through this configurator process, you can, again, call those engineering calculations, and the sales engineer might be able to determine if this configuration is meeting a customer's requirements. I'm also, again, whoops, sorry about that, throwing some warning messages here about whether the bed is too long or too short into the end users. Again, you can put these warning messages all over. So here, maybe what I'll do is, enter in an overall length. I can enter in a width here. Maybe this is going to be 85 inches. And what you'll see is the price is changing, and you'll also notice in a second that the max load will also change. I can put in a side taper angle here of maybe 5 degrees. The number of vertical supports maybe we'll put in as 4, and you can see the load is changing. And then the frame member size we're going to use on the end of these might be 2 inches versus 1. Right? So you can, hopefully, this is again just a demonstration, you could use your imagination here, but there could be any number of parameters that could be called here to set up an overall configuration. We can have any number of calculations occurring that can give it the end user feedback. But the idea would be, though, that this might be a completely new bed based on the length, width, and height of this, and we might need to go out and call a CAD tool like Creo to go up and build these models. Right? So here we'll just go in and again, this is a similar situation or UI where I could have what selections I've created in there, and I can have an auto part numbering, which is going on right here. I can enter in a name for this particular bed, and then from here I could tell it to call CAD and create the new bed. Now I'm not going to do that in the interest of time. It actually does take about 2 or 3 minutes to go create the new bed, but the end result of that is actually a new set of Creo models. Now clearly this is a pretty simple Creo model here for the number of side angles, but these could be custom parts, right? So this could have its own custom dimensions built onto it based on those taper angles and the heights and widths that we set in from the configurator. We could also call and have Controls Pro go create drawings with bill of materials information from this. So clearly being able to call from the Controls Pro, the CAD tool, to custom build up these deliverables is a very, very powerful concept, right? And that would then, again, check this data into Windchill and can add it to the configuration. So now if we come back to the configurator, what you'll see is we get a green light saying, hey, here's the length and width, we've got a new assembly name for this, and we can go in, we have an estimated cost that's now being added to the quote, and I can go create that as a configuration as well. Right? So there's a lot of different power to create this. This ETO bed would be considered something like a module. In the context of a higher level configuration, we can build in custom quoting on this ETO bed, and again, we can call CAD to develop this. Now once I'm done with this, clearly we can initiate a lot of those downstream processes in Windchill, but we could also come back to this overall quote. And now as a sales engineer, I can see these two new vehicles that we've quoted. We could have had other products drive other UIs and configurations for us. We could then add in some, common sales terms like, what are the terms on that? What's FOB? Any other notes? And from here, I could go into a delivery type phase where I could put in how I want this quote to look. I can either add in the details or no details. I can add in a quote multiplier. We could actually pull in some information from perhaps Salesforce.com to get, pricing information from there. I can take little items and move them around and up and down inside the quote list. So this gives a sales engineer some capabilities to, take and configure that quote. And when I'm ready, I could tell it to generate a quote document for me. And again, this is a pretty simple example, but this is a quote document then that has been derived from our high-level project information, which was the U.S. Army, my contact and the date. We can have the project name, the terms on it. Then here are all the item numbers for that first vehicle configuration, some items for the second vehicle, and we can generate this and either email that out. We can send that quote to Windchill as a new document. So there's a lot of options on how you might want to handle and administer this end document. And then from there, we might be done with this particular quote. It would bring us back to that project information, and we could create another quote for this particular project. Or if we're finished with that, it would store that as a quote that we've just created in the Controls Pro environment. It would have a link to that item inside of Windchill, and of course we'd have all that downstream CAD and BOM information developed in the PLM system. So with that, I wanted to thank you for attending. I think we can open this up to some questions in the last 10 minutes or comments from anybody. I'd also encourage you, here's my contact information right here, steve.schroeder@tristar.com. You can contact me directly via email, and I could answer any questions for you guys. On TriStar.com, we also have some time-limited offers up there for some great deals on PTC software. If you go into TriStar.com, you can also find out more information about our Controls Pro product, explore that webpage, and if you'd like a more detailed demonstration on how this UI was developed, maybe some examples of how to link it into CAD in more detail, we would welcome the opportunity to talk with you further about this. So at this point, I'm ready for any questions if there are any. You can type them into the questions side or even into the chat area on GoToWebinar, and I will hang on the phone for any questions or comments that come in. Thank you for attending. I don't see any questions coming in, so I'll give it a couple more minutes in case anybody has any comments or questions.